And good evening. I'm Trace Gallagher. It's 10 p.m. on the East Coast, 7 o'clock here in Los Angeles. And this is a breaking news edition of Fox News at Night. There are reports coming in that Israel has now begun its highly anticipated retaliatory strikes against Iran. Now, we are tracking these developments, and we are hearing that explosions have been heard over Iran proper, as well as in southern Syria, and explosions heard above Iraq. We do not know if any areas of Iraq were hit. We think there were some explosions in southern Syria, and there are reports of possibility of strikes in southern Iran near the Natanz and the Fordow nuclear facilities. Remember, these are the facilities that are said to be places that you can produce nuclear weapons. They also have a uranium conversion facility in Isfahan. And this is also in southern Iran, and there are reports that there have been airstrikes in that area as well. Let's get live on the ground now to Tel Aviv. That's where Trey Yinks joins us live. Trey, what are you hearing? What are we learning?
Yeah, hey, Trace, good evening. Right now we are following reports out of the region of airstrikes taking place in Iran, Iraq, and Syria. The Israelis at this moment have not confirmed that this is the retaliation to that massive Iranian drone and missile attack last weekend. But here's what we know. Some outlets citing American officials. And again, these are preliminary reports based on the information that we are gathering right now. We've reached out to Israeli defense officials and are waiting for comment. Local media is reporting explosions in the Iranian city of Isfahan. Isfahan sits about 200 miles to the south of the Iranian capital of Tehran. At this location, there is an Iranian nuclear facility. There are also reports of activity at other locations across Iran. This is significant because, remember, the initial reporting leading up to tonight had to do with what might be a limited Israeli response to this large-scale attack last weekend conducted by the Iranians. So in terms of the targets that were likely hit in any sort of strike and retaliation from the Israelis, you are looking at nuclear research facilities, additionally any sort of IRGC locations across the Middle East in places like Syria and Iraq, and then Iranian-backed proxies across the region. And so Iran-backed Iraqi and Syrian Shia militias certainly would be on that target list for the Israelis. The Israelis looking to send a message to Iran, if this is confirmed that they are behind these strikes, not to ever attack directly from Iranian territory toward Israel, and also to ensure that they will keep control of their proxies across the region. The big concern here has to do with Iranian nuclear aspirations. And I want to break down something very important here, Trace, because if it is confirmed that Isfahan was one of the targets for the Israelis tonight in this retaliation, it is significant for two reasons. We'll point back to June of last year when the UN nuclear watchdog was concerned that they went into a probe and found uranium particles that were enriched up to 83%, just short of the 90% weapons-grade material line, an indication that Iran is getting very close to the ability to create a nuclear weapon. Other watchdogs over the past several months have said the Iranian breakout time for such a weapon is basically zero. And this means Iran, in response to this, may not react militarily, but could say they are changing their nuclear doctrine. One other important note here, Trace, when we look at the Iranian attack last weekend. Iran, for the first time in their country's history, fired on Israel directly with what appeared to be Shahab ballistic missiles. These are the missiles that if Iran were to create a nuclear warhead, they would use to target any country around the world. And they used this missile last weekend without a nuclear warhead, and they were successful in targeting Israel. So again, tonight, we are unable to confirm the reports at this moment, but initial reporting indicates explosions in Iran, Iraq, and Syria, and this does come on the heels of the threats of Israeli retaliation following that Iranian attack last weekend that included ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. Trace.
And if I can ask you about the diplomacy here, Trey, very quickly, because there were reports coming out of Qatar today saying that the United States said they would okay Israel going into Rafah, a mission in Rafah. if they did not retaliate against Iran. So is it your understanding that it appears as of late today, the United States was not privy to any information about this attack, or is it just too soon to know?
It's too soon to know, but we should note the Israelis were coordinating closely with the Americans and an informal coalition to respond to that Iranian ballistic missile and drone attack last weekend. Now, this is an important note here because in the past, there have been no formal agreements for the United States and others to shoot down incoming missiles or drones toward Israel. But there was a clear coordinated effort. And according to briefings that I was a part of with top Israeli Air Force officials, the training for the mission to shoot down these missiles and drones went on for months prior to the Iranian attack. So we do have reason to believe that the Israelis have been in close coordination with the Americans and that they would inform the United States ahead of any sort of action against targets in Iran. At this moment, and you might be able to hear overhead, the civilian airspace over Israel is not closed, but we are following and tracking civilian flights toward Iran and can confirm that some civilian airliners actually turned back from the Gulf. They were headed toward the Iranian capital of Tehran and made a U-turn amid these reports of Israeli strikes in Iranian territory. The Israelis will certainly want to act with decisive actions. They want to catch the Iranians off guard, unlike what we saw in the weeks prior ahead of the Iranian attack against Israel. Because again, the Israelis are looking to send a clear message to the Iranians that any sort of direct attack toward Israeli territory would not be accepted. I also want to note one other thing following a briefing with Israeli Air Force officials. They say they are on high alert across this country, fearing Iranian retaliation. Everyone from Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, to President Ibrahim Raisi, to some top IRGC officials this week, made clear that they would react what they called immediately to any sort of Israeli response to the attack over the weekend. So Israeli air defense, as we speak, Trace, is on high alert across this country. Everything from the Iron Dome that would pick up fire from places like southern Lebanon with Iran's largest proxy in the region, Hezbollah, and then some of the larger air defense systems like David's Sling and the Arrow system that we actually saw here in Tel Aviv during that Iranian attack last weekend, active intercepting some of those incoming drones and ballistic missiles. The question tonight is what were the targets in this apparent Israeli response to the Iranian attack last weekend? Again, the Israelis have a variety of targets they could hit, not just inside Iranian territory, but across the region, understanding that Iran's IRGC has bases in places like Iraq and Syria, and they're also supporting Shia militias that are operating in those areas that give them what has been described to Fox News as an octopus's tentacles across the Middle East, stretching Iranian influence not only to threaten Israel, but also to threaten American forces across the region. Because as we saw since the October 7th massacre and the regional tension that followed, numerous attacks against American bases across the Middle East. And so part of this response likely to strike fear into these Iran-backed Iraqi and Syrian Shia militias that are operating across the region. And if it is confirmed in Isfahan, this city that is just about 200 miles to the south of Tehran, this would be significant because it shows the Israelis are stepping up their strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. You might remember back in 2020, it was November of 2020, the Israelis in a covert operation killed the top Iranian nuclear scientist, Mohammad Fakhrizadeh. Now, this is a man who was responsible for years when it came to Iran's nuclear program and their developments toward a nuclear weapon. Remember, when the Iran nuclear deal from 2015 collapsed, Iran started enriching uranium closer and closer to weapons-grade material. And the biggest concern for Israel was that they would ultimately create a nuclear weapon and then attach that warhead to a ballistic missile, like a missile that was fired toward Israel over the weekend, and target the Jewish state with such a projectile. We understand the breakout period is anywhere from just 0 days to a matter of days and possibly even a week, according to international observers. And the concern for Israel is that they could use this enriched uranium to create a nuclear bomb that would target this country. And so it would not be surprising if the target was Isfahan, this top research facility inside Iranian territory. And again, the Israelis have been very clear, everyone from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the country's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and others, that they have the targets already chosen inside Iran, and they are able to ratchet up the pressure on the Iranian regime if there is any sort of response to this counterstrike following the attack last weekend that was conducted by the Iranians. Trace?
Trey Yingst, great information. Stand by if you would. We'll get back to you as the news warrants.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.